coming up.
Straight away you can smell it.
Fill a container with well over 100,000 vapes.
How blatant is this?
They didn't even bother concealing them.
That's right, the government has banned the sale of harmful vapes.
35 different vapes in there.
Spoiled for choice.
But business continues to boom.
It's unscrupulous.
Why?
They are still selling flavoured nicotine vapes to customers throughout Australia.
Well, that is illegal.
Welcome to Extra Minutes, the 60 Minutes podcast. I'm Eryk Bagshaw. I'm an investigative reporter for the Sydney Morning Herald and The Age, and occasionally 60 Minutes. And with me is Laura Sparks, one of the brilliant producers at 60 Minutes.
Thank you.
And together we've been investigating the vaping industry for about 4 months. So today we're going to take you through what we found. And you can catch the stories in the Sydney Morning Herald and The Age, 60 Minutes, as well as 9Now and YouTube. What surprised you most, do you think, Laura?
This is a story that you brought to 60 Minutes. So I was surprised at a lot of it, of course, but I did go out with a 25-year-old vapor. So after the legislation was passed, it is now illegal to sell vapes in any stores apart from pharmacies. So we went out to see just how many are still selling. And we went to 10 stores within 90 minutes, within a 3-kilometre radius of each other, and she got a vape at every single one of them. Every single one of them. And I was shocked because, I mean, the fines are quite large. I think they're $2 million fines and possible jail time.
So they're really still everywhere.
Absolutely. That's what we found, yeah. And I thought that was quite shocking because obviously the point of the legislation is to stop kids buying vapes. Well, admittedly, she was 25, but she could get one anywhere.
It's difficult to imagine that with a market so big and clearly so flourishing, you'd think that the government would be trying to crack down on this.
Yeah, I mean, the Therapeutic Goods Administration is currently raiding these stores. I don't know how many they're doing. They claim that they have already seized 1.2 million vapes, but obviously they need to do more because there are so many stores flouting the new laws and they just seem to be ignoring them.
One of the areas I think that we found where action is taking place during the course of our investigation was actually at the border. What did we see there when we went down to look at an Australian Border Force seizure? Yeah,
well, I was quite surprised at that particular haul because it was pretty large. I think they told us there was 28,000 vapes or vaping products in those boxes that you walked around. And do you remember when you opened up the box, the smell?
It was extraordinary. Blackberry ice, blueberry ice, and it was this waft that you didn't actually even have to open up the box inside the box, which contained the vapes. It was the carton that it was in. And the guys that were talking to there, you're just like, they could pick the smell from a mile off. And, basically their reaction was, oh, here we go, another one, another 1,000 vapes, another pallet. There was just so many of them in this warehouse that it was kind of overwhelming.
Yeah, and I mean, you spoke to the Australian Border Force Assistant Commissioner Tony Smith, and he did say to us reluctantly that China is still the biggest importer, so they're the ones breaking the rules more than any other country. And I think we saw that as well in the in the vapes that we bought. 7 out of 10 were iGets, which are a very popular Chinese brand. But I mean, the ABF are doing a really good job. They really are getting a lot at the border, but there seems to be a problem in the stores. And your investigation found that organised crime are involved now too.
Well, that's right. I mean, it's such a lucrative business. These vapes have gone from about $25 per vape to $55 to $60 per vape now. That's in the space of 6 months. So what's happened with the government making this product illegal is that it's ramped up the price of each product and therefore the profits of organised crime, who are now waging their own turf wars to make sure that their vapes are getting into particular stores in Victoria and New South Wales, because it's seen as kind of this relatively low risk product. Ultimately, you've got stuff that's like bubble gum and double apple flavour in these kind of USB stick devices. It's hardly bags of cocaine, but the profit margins are still so large that for a lot of organised crime figures, it's a very lucrative way of either washing money to make them invest in other areas that are probably a bit more high risk, or of continuing to generate profits. And in the same way that we've seen with the illicit tobacco trade, where the price of cigarettes has gone up to $60 a packet, all of a sudden at a certain point, consumers stop wanting to go down the legal path if they are addicted and start wanting to go down the illegal path. And that means that these kind of markets can flourish, even with the best of intentions from the government. I think that's the real problem that they're facing here.
So so by making it illegal, it's just playing right into the hands of organised crime. And of course, we've seen how dangerous it is getting with the firebombings of various convenience stores down in Victoria and here in New South Wales.
Yeah, that's right. And it's a combination of that illicit tobacco and the vapes now, which are starting, particularly amongst the younger generation, to become preferable to cigarettes. Some might argue that's a good thing. Other health professionals believe it's not. But at the end of the day, these kind of rather innocent-looking, colourful packages are becoming this very lucrative market for those organised crime figures.
Yeah, but I guess, from the government's perspective, they had to do something because vapes were everywhere in primary schools. I mean, we were told that schools are putting teachers into the toilets at school every lunchtime to stop vaping in the toilets. It's a huge problem, and parents know how big a problem it is. So I guess what were they to do? And as you say, the way these vapes were marketed to children, colours, flavours, no mention of nicotine, and these kids are getting addicted. And I mean, we interviewed Lily, and Lily didn't even know that there was nicotine in her vape when she first started vaping at 15.
Yeah, you have to wonder with the government's response, is it partly doing something, but also being seen to be doing something? And I think this is one of the really interesting things we looked at, was how it tried to get pharmacists on board with this push. And that has been a real challenge for them, transferring the vapes from the illegal market to the legal market.
Mm-hmm. Well, the Pharmacy Guild of Australia are really upset about this, and they're actually... there's a rebellion going on against the legislation. Most pharmacists have said, we are not going to sell vapes. In the legislation, they are the only ones allowed to sell vapes, and those vapes have to be mint, menthol and tobacco flavoured, unlike the multicoloured sweet flavours that have been available up to this point. But the pharmacists don't want to sell them because they see them as being dangerous. I think they're called a Schedule 3. I think that's what they are. Schedule 3 drug. All Schedule 3 drugs in pharmacies have to be approved by the Therapeutic Goods Administration. There's a list. They're approved. These vapes are not on the TGA approved list. They're on a separate list.
It's called a notified list.
Notified list, which the pharmacists have never heard of before. So the government's made up a list just for the vapes that the pharmacists can sell. I mean...
Yeah, it's quite extraordinary. They've created, the pharmacy says they've created basically a device to make sure that pharmacies can sell these products, which almost no pharmacy really wants to sell. To the point where Anthony Tassone, one of the leaders of the Pharmacy Guild in Victoria, is putting up posters around his pharmacies and like-minded pharmacists saying no vapes sold here. So it's not just sort of quietly saying, we're not going to sell these products. They're actually actively campaigning against it. And that's a really interesting dilemma I'm not sure many governments have confronted before, where you're telling people that they should sell this product, and the people that are meant to be selling this legal product are saying, nah, we're not interested.
No, because, if a product is stocked behind the pharmacy counter, they are known as at least a Schedule 3. I think that's what it's called. So... because these have not been approved by the Therapeutic Goods Administration, they feel like their duty of care is being forgotten about here, because they have a duty of care to sell safe and effective medication to customers. They don't feel that these vapes are safe and effective. medication. Well, they're not medication, are they?
And we've seen even with some of the companies that have been approved or not approved, have been put and self-declared to be allowed to be on this notified list, that some of them are not necessarily acting with the best of intentions either.
Yes, the made-up list has some vapes by the name of Relks, and I can't remember but Relks, yeah. And you did some investigative work on Relks. Do you want to tell us about them?
So I first came across them when I was in my previous role. I was a North Asia correspondent, and we were looking at the Chinese vaping industry, which, as you will note, is a key source of a lot of the vapes here. And this company came up because of an office that it hosted in Singapore. Now, in that office, there was a recording taken. It was first obtained by the Straits Times, where the company actually sort of boasted about paying the Australian government to try and get access to the legal market. What we then discovered, and we then went back and traced the documents of this company, which was trading under a company known as Hello SG. We traced its ownership and the rental documents back to a company in Hong Kong, and then to another company in the Cayman Islands. And what it revealed was that this company was owned by the same people as Relks. Relks is one of the world's largest vaping companies. You will see it all over the world. And at the moment, what I've had confirmed is that the Singaporean government is now investigating that company and its role in those markets. So this is one of the biggest players that have been approved to be on the TGA notified list, now being told to be sold in pharmacies, talking about making payments to the Australian government, and still advertising products on its websites that are not approved to be legally sold.
That's right. So they've got the best of both worlds. They're selling illegal products on their website, and they've got legal vapes on the made-up notified list. And you put this all to Health Minister Mark Butler, didn't you?
I did. And Mark Butler's also said that they're certainly going to take a strong look at it. And I think it goes to the point that this legislation and the changes that they tried to get through were all pretty rushed. You know, up until that point when it was going to be prescription only, effective, market-wide ban on vapes, it was pretty hard line. But they needed a political solution to get the Greens on board to get these vape laws passed. And I think we're now seeing the consequences in some ways of that legislation being rushed. And equally, we are still seeing a proliferation of illegal vapes across Australian streets. Yes, Border Force is seizing as many as it can, but the numbers are so large that it's actually difficult to keep track of. And the Chinese companies that are not in the legal market, but in the illegal market, such as I get, are still pumping out hundreds of thousands of vapes. I mean, we've got a video that we discovered, which shows the Chinese companies actually putting their staff through military drills.
I get stuff.
Exactly. To pump out these vapes, to kind of instill in them this national pride. And those vapes are the ones that are flooding into the Australian market and into the hands of kids.
Yeah, well, as I said, we bought seven of the 10 that we bought were iGets. iGets also has a prolific website here in Australia. iGet, I shouldn't say what it is, but you can buy any number of iGet, flavoured vapes. Illegal on that website.
Yeah.
But I mean, something had to be done. And we met young Lily, who started vaping at 15. And let's remember, it was actually very difficult to get any young person to talk about how they quit vaping. I don't quite understand why, but there's a stigma. Mm-hmm. She did tell us that she'd been bullied after going on another media program. So, yeah, I mean, it's an unusual conundrum that we face, that here we are trying to do a story on vaping, and it was really difficult to actually find a young person to talk about quitting. Yeah,
I think there is both a stigma attached to it. There is sort of this idea that it's perhaps, so commonplace that it's kind of become, part of people's, identity, their social circles, that there's a fear of speaking out against it, because a lot of vested interests. Lily was targeted particularly by sort of pro-vaping campaigners, but also your friends, are sitting there going, well, we enjoy this lolly stick and it might be full of nicotine, but we're going to keep huffing and puffing on it. And I think it's become so normalised in Australia that there is that kind of real risk that people just kind of dismiss it. But the truth is, it is in many ways addicting a whole new generation of people, teenagers, to a product that for the first time we've actually seen total nicotine consumption in Australia grow since Australia's world-leading tobacco laws were put in place.
And, let's be frank, these teenagers that started picking it up, 2015, 2016, 2017, 2018, I mean, they are not kids that were going to smoke. No kids were ever going to pick up a smoke. Not after the successful marketing campaign that we had here in Australia. You talk to any teenager, my children, I remember them saying, Mum, you didn't smoke, did you? Because it kills you. Have you seen the photos on the cigarette packets? There is no way those kids would have picked up cigarettes. So what did Big Tobacco do? They found another way of getting nicotine into the systems of our youth. And that was vaping. I mean, it's criminal in itself what they did, I think.
Yeah, and particularly the marketing campaigns, the early days, things like Juul, other products which were slick. I mean, they look almost like Apple devices. You kind of got these really hip advertising around these products. And that was certainly for the first 4 or 5 years, and particularly in America and Europe, that really brought out this kind of, this image of vaping. And then I think what the Chinese and now Middle Eastern players, they're the next sort of group that are into the vaping market, are doing is sort of latching on to that sort of image and producing vapes at a much cheaper rate for the mass market. And the key thing we've got to remember here is that this isn't the old school days of big tobacco where you literally had to have huge tobacco farms to be able to produce a product at scale. It actually takes land to make tobacco and cigarettes. These companies in China are working out of huge warehouses and factories in Shenzhen and pumping out little vials of nicotine liquid with some flavouring and putting them into electronic devices. It is a much more efficient, much more cost-effective process and a much faster way of mass nicotine delivery.
I mean, we all know how addictive nicotine is, but I think where the criminality lies is the way, as you say, that they were marketed. I mean, it got to the point where the ads looked like they were marketing lollies to 10-year-olds, not nicotine products. And that's the point that Quit, Rachel Anderson, CEO of Quit, made to you. That it was the market. I mean, they solely focused on trying to get kids to vape. It's quite incredible. And I think it took everyone by surprise. It took parents by surprise and it took our governments by surprise. And now everyone's playing catch up and the Australian government is trying to do the right thing. But whether or not they've done it,
it's a real challenge because equally, whilst Australia has made these kind of made them mostly illegal, many other places in the world they're not. So countries like across Asia and in the Middle East are free to produce them and market them. And if you travel around Asia, certainly, you will see marketing of vapes everywhere.
And the United States.
So it's a different market. And Australia has often taken this kind of world-leading health approach to some of these controls, perhaps because it has the benefit of being an island that can control what comes in and out. But overwhelmingly, it is an outlier on the global stage, and so it will be interesting to see what other governments. I think the UK is talking to the Australian government quite closely. We were told that even the Chinese are now liaising closely. A sign of closer bilateral relations between the two countries about some controls over the exports. Where this all lands in a market that, as we say, is becoming far more lucrative, not just for the producers, but for organised crime elements who are seeking to profit out of it as well.
Yeah, I think it's a problem that hasn't been solved yet, and the government has got a fair way to go yet.
Well, thanks so much for talking today, Laura.
No worries.
If you want to catch more of our story, you can catch it on 9Now and YouTube, as well as the Sydney Morning Herald and The Age.